Hello and welcome to this course that is going to outline for you a phone call evaluation form that you can use in your business to ensure that your phone calls are going the way that you want them to be going. Now, it's not really a secret that most of our sales, for most of us anyway, are coming through the phones, whether that's your wholesale customers calling in or your retail customers calling in, or someone calling into your service drive, scheduling an appointment, or maybe even some outbound calls that you might be doing to try and drum up some business. The point is that the phone is extremely important. And if it's not managed properly, it can really start to slowly but surely diminish all of the great initiatives that you have in place just because someone isn't following the procedures that you want them to. Now, this is not something that you're going to be able to do for every phone call. I'm just going to point that out right now, but it is something you can maybe do once a month, maybe once every 2 weeks, once a week actually would be really ideal. And it's not something you could probably do for every employee once a week, but if you were able to do one of these once a week, I think number one, it would open up a discussion, a dialogue with your team about best practices on the phone. And number two, you're going to be able to make sure that the phone calls you're listening in on are being handled in the way that you would handle them yourself. Now, there is one constraint here that's pretty obvious. If you don't have the ability to go back and listen to recorded calls or to listen in on a call as it's happening, one thing you could do is just sit with your advisor, whoever is taking the call or whoever's placing the outbound call, and just simply perform this evaluation with them. Now, the only reason that I don't really recommend that is because you're going to get some of the Hawthorne effect, which is that they're just going to do better because you're there with them, watching them, grading them. So it's not going to be the same as every other call. You really want to do this in a way that not secretive, but you don't want them to know which calls you're listening in on, right? Because you want to ensure that those calls that they think that you're not listening in on, that they're handling those the same way as the ones that you are actively listening in on. Okay, so with that being said, let's go over this evaluation form. Now you can see there's actually a grade right here. If you're looking in column I, and you come over here and you can see there's a 52.6% total. Now, this is driven by these responses right here. So yes responses, no, not applicable, automatic fails, total applicable categories, and overall total categories. All of this comes together and creates this percentage of how well you did based on what you have in your form. So this is a form that I've actually used, that I've done some consulting with in the past. And it is amazing how you can take something as simple as a phone call, put a metric to it and say, hey, these are the things that we're focusing on in our approach, in our assessments, in our presentation, in our problem solving, and study these things. And I want you to go from a 52%. And next time I want you to just be at a 70%, and you can really start to make some performance-based plans to ensure that this happens. So again, this is one of the forms that I have already used, being that it has a score on it and everything. You can see it was for someone named John. His manager's name was Roger, and they were evaluated by me. And here's how I graded them. And keep in mind that you can change these to meet your individual needs. So if this isn't something you're focused on using a standardized grading, you can change that. But in this dealer's case, it was either, yes, we did use the standard grading, no, we did not, which in this case happened, or not applicable, which you'll find later that is used quite a bit. And it's important that it's there. So let's review this. So I listened into a 7-minute phone call. And what I did was I went down the line. Did we use the correct grading? It turned out no. So my comment was, hey, this is how you answered. You know what our correct grading is, but you answered, hey, Parts John, help you, right? And I think we've all heard that grading before, and it's really unacceptable in my opinion. So that gets a ding, that gets a negative mark, that gets a no. Now here we say asked for necessary customer information. In this case, it was not applicable. And the reason it's not applicable is because the customer and John had a relationship already. The customer called him directly, and John already knew all of the information about that customer. So I'm not going to ding him for that. That's a good thing. It's a great thing to have a good relationship. And some of you might say, well, I'm not going to use that greeting for customers that call me all the time. I have a great relationship with, and here's what I would say to that. Just because you have a good relationship with a customer, it doesn't mean you can get lazy on the things that are fundamental. Okay, so you should be providing them with the same experience level as someone just calling in that you don't know. In fact, maybe even a little bit more. So the fact that we didn't use a greeting here was definitely negative. And finally, on the approach, used the customer's name at least once during the call. I put down here, always write down the customer's name. And of course, we already discussed he knew that customer, which I didn't know at the time. So we put a no for that because he actually didn't use the customer's name. But what that does is it personalizes that experience. And again, even if you know who it is, I understand where people are coming from when they say that. And that's why I say you can change these, right? If that doesn't apply to you, then that's fine. For me, I want to ensure that we're providing the same level of service, no matter who the customer is, how long we've known them. And so that got a negative mark. Now, if we go down to the needs assessment, the first one here is listen to the customer and did not interrupt. And he did a fantastic job with that. He didn't interrupt, he listened, and he got to the point of what he was needing. The second one is ask questions to better assist the customer if necessary. Now, he did end up doing that because he had to clarify a couple of things. But just keep in mind that if you have a situation where it was a very cut and dry sale, then you can very easily use the NA column for not applicable for something like this. And lastly, on the needs assessment, engaged customer while looking up parts. And he did do a good job with that, talking to him, how was your weekend, etc. Things like that can go a long way. So he did a great job on the needs assessment portion. Now on the presentation. So first one here, located correct part regardless of OEM. This was in the heavy duty world where we have multiple sort of levels of the same product in terms of price and OEM. And we really tried to be more of an all makes dealer versus just what our OEM was. And so we did do a good job doing that. So that is a positive mark. Now, second is provided information about alternatives. In this case, we did not go through the good, better, best. And in fact, what we did was we just went with the good. And that was a training opportunity because the good is the cheap and it's the easy one to present. And that's really not what we want. We want to leave that up to the customer by presenting all of them. So that was a negative mark. Now, demonstrated product or job knowledge, how the part benefits the customer. We did not present anything like that. So we presented just the good, which is the low tier one. We also didn't demonstrate how that part benefits the customer in any way, what the warranty was, anything like that. So next is advised customer of product pricing, availability, delivery options, and ETA. Actually, the customer had to ask about all these things, right? Besides pricing. So availability, delivery options, when we could have it to them. The customer actually had to ask us about that. We don't want that. That's a negative mark. And finally, suggested further parts or service. So in the case that it was an alternator, we should have recommended the belt, or we should have gone through the pulleys, or we should have made a suggestion based on a question we've asked previously. So there was no attempt there. It was just, hey, this is the price, and that's it. So yes, that is a negative mark. Now, problem solving. You can see here that I have NA on all these, so let's go through them just so that you understand. Listen to the customer's concern and ask details about their concern. So there wasn't really a concern. They were just asking for a part, but it's in here because there are situations that is definitely something that is required, where listening and active listening, in fact, is required, and many more details. So next, showed empathy, apologized when necessary, took ownership of the issue and sought fair resolution, and informed the customer before transferring to responsible party if necessary. So you could see how all of these could come up in a call. In this case, it did not. But if we were just being totally rude to the customer because they didn't understand something, well, that would have been a negative mark because we did not show any empathy to the customer. And this is my favorite one, took ownership of the issue and sought fair resolution. If you do not take ownership and you just continuously pass it on, blame someone else in the department, blame your OEM, whatever it is, that is a negative mark. In this case, we did not have that issue. Okay, next is closing the call. So you see here summarized order details. He did not say, okay, this is what you're purchasing, this is the price, this is when we can get it to you, etc. So that's a negative mark. Established method of payment, if applicable. He did not do that either. This is not a charge account. He should have taken payment up front for that. Confirmed account information, if unknown. He did not do that and ended up billing it under the wrong account, in fact. On the plus side, we asked if there was anything else we could do, and we also thanked the customer for their business at the end of the call. So that is a fantastic job on those aspects. And again, on closing the phone call, this is what we identified was important to us at the time. Summarizing the order details, making sure that they understand this is what you're getting, this is the price, this is when I'm getting it to you. Making sure that we have payment already taken care of before the parts driver gets there. That's a big deal. You don't want your parts driver collecting payment ever. You want to take care of that up front unless it's cash or a check, which should be pretty rare now that we're headed into 2021. So try to get a payment method up front. And then confirmation of account information. That's obviously important and for obvious reasons. Now, soft skills are evaluated after the call. So you think back, you reflect a little bit, and you say, okay, spoke positively and professionally. And yeah, we absolutely did do that, which is a huge thing. If you sound negative all the time, people are not going to want to call you. Avoided long silences, 30 plus. We did avoid those. Was polite, said thank you. Yep, we did do that. Asked to place on hold and waited for a customer response if needed, not applicable. We did not have to put this customer on hold. An appropriate time was spent on the call. 7 minutes was very efficient. I thought that was a good call in terms of time spent. Okay, so basically what you can see here is for each one of these lines, you have these comments. And the reason these are here is because you want to type in your suggestions. Even if they pass, if they got a yes, you want to say, hey, just remember for next time, this, and this. Try to focus on this, or if it's a particular part that you're talking about, right? So you can see I have a couple of comments in here, nothing too crazy, but this is a good area to put in your comments and use as a performance coaching opportunity. Now, the very last thing you're going to do is determine whether they automatically failed. For me, if you're just totally rude to the customer, you get a 0%. If you suggested calling a competitor, you get a 0%. For some reason, this happens all the time. I have no idea why anyone would think that that's okay, but that is not okay. If you use foul language, even if you're joking around, the customer, he's your brother, I don't really care. That's not how we do things here. Spoke ill of company or coworkers. So, if you put blame back on your coworker or you spoke ill of the company you're working for, that is a 0%. And if you prematurely disconnect the call before the customer has a chance to say bye, for example, that is an automatic fail. You just need to wait for them to hang up. And right here, I have general notes and additional comments. Now you can read here that pretty much I was just giving him praise for having a fantastic call in terms of his soft skills and how polite he was and things like that. And even though it was a 52%, it was just very, very close to being a much higher percentage, just a couple things to work on. So the more that you can put in there, the better. It's going to help build those good habits. And then on the additional comments, let's listen to this next week and discuss over our next coaching call. So what I did was I said, hey, prepare some notes on some things you can improve going forward based on what you failed with. And that's kind of a key aspect of this, which is you want them to reflect on how they performed the call. You don't want to just bulldoze them and say, hey, this is what you were really bad at. You need to get better, right? Let them reflect on it and let them come up with ways that they can do better. Now, one thing that I will say is that you want to actually take this entire form and highlight it just like this. Oops. Highlight it all the way down to the bottom. Okay. And once you have those things highlighted, you want to go to File, Print, and you're going to want to print this to a PDF. Now, I always change this to only the current selection. That's why we highlight it. And you can see everything is right there. Okay. Now, you should have a file on your computer for each employee that takes phone calls. And when you do a phone call evaluation for them, you want to save this in there so that you can reflect back on how they've improved over time or how they've gotten worse on certain things, and give them access to that folder as well. Make sure that they can go back and look at it. And if you're lucky enough to have actual recordings of phone calls, put the recordings in there as well so that there's always some kind of coaching tool available for them to use at all times. So again, this is the phone call evaluation form. Obviously, these X's right here all get put into these responses right here, which drives your percentage. So if I highlight these and I just hit the delete button, you can see that that changes, right? So what you'll do is you'll just delete these X's out after you're done, clear this whole thing out and get ready for the next one. And you will be on your way to absolutely stellar phone calls. And you'll be able to be rest assured that phone calls are being handled in the way that you want them handled, even when you're not around, even when you're not listening to them at all. If you do random phone pops, and maybe that's what you need to do if you don't have a recording mechanism or you can't go back and look at calls or listen in, maybe you do a phone pop and you call into your own department and you just give them a challenge and grade them based on how well they did. But again, make sure you save those things in a file, give them access to it, talk about it, bring them into your office and talk about it, and talk about why these things are important. Now, one thing I will say is that you need to go through these and ensure that these are what is most important to your business right now. I've already broken down the phases of the phone call. So those are, you can change those as well if you would like to. But just ensure that these are what you want your team to be focusing on. Not everyone's going to have located correct part regardless of OEM, because not everyone sells multiple OEMs. So as always, if you need help changing this, if you need help implementing this, please feel free to shoot me an email, jscott@partsinnovations.com.